Hello and welcome to the Genius Move Audio Academy podcast. My name is Paul Brewer. In this podcast, I'll chat to people who are professionally involved in the music business both here in Ireland and abroad. If you're listening to this, perhaps you have an interest in learning. Please visit geniusmove.ie, check my courses or book a one-to-one teaching session. Today's guest is Andy Jackson. He works as a product manager for Solid State Logic, otherwise known as SSL. I first met Andy in 2012 at Peter Gabriel's Real World studio. It was an SSL-run event with mixer Chris Lord-Alge. We sat down for a chat over the internet and started by reminiscing about the event.
That was a while ago. Yes, I remember that day quite vividly. I was thinking of the console setting on fire as well.
Oh, yes, indeed. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, the puff of blue smoke at the back. Yeah, that was classic as well.
Yeah, it was eventful. Yeah. It was eventful.
So what was your role then?
My role then, I think I had not long taken on the role of product manager at SSL for studio equipment. So yeah, that was pretty new into that at that point. And
had you come up through the ranks in SSL or how did it work?
I'd come up through one rank, which was I initially joined as a product specialist. So I'd been doing that for about 18 months. And then the opportunity came up to fill the product manager role. And yeah, I jumped at it really. It was quite a fortunate timing. So
I was surprised to meet you in London a few years later. Was it 2014 or something like that?
Yep.
When you obviously left SSL and were working as an engineer, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. I got there came a point I got itchy feet and I thought I wanted to have another crack at walking the walk rather than sort of talking the talk about using the equipment. So I took what I now refer to as a bit of a 2-year sabbatical, let's call it, where I moved to London and did various things, recording, live sound, teaching, just a whole raft of things to get back into engineering and stuff like that for a while. So yeah, that was 2014. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And then discovered that it wasn't for you.
Well, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. It was definitely, I'm glad I scratched the itch, I guess is the saying, isn't it? And yeah, I got involved with such a range of things, from a bit of production, some assistant engineering, really a whole spectrum, assisting some great people like Wes Clark, who does a lot of pop mixing. But it just got to the point where I think a bit of a reality check, and I thought I could carry on doing this for 5, 10, 15 years, maybe not have a lot to show for it at the end of it. So once I think the itch was scratched, and it just so happened SSL were sort of having a bit of investment in the product team, so they sort of had a conversation with me and said, was I interested in going back, and I was. So that was that really.
Yeah, I remember chatting to Mark Ronson's engineer.
Yes, yeah,
and he was on 300 quid a week in London. I forget
his name as well, but I do know who you're talking about. Italian guy.
Yes.
Yeah, lovely guy. He showed me round once because one of the people I was working with was based at Tile Yard. Great guy, great engineer. I think that tells you everything you sort of need to know about, the state of the industry really at that time. So
you went back to SSL, the same position, or?
Yeah, the same position, but I guess with a bit of a fresh start, so to speak. And I think basically the company were beginning to really take the product, the role of like product management and the product team. They're really stepping up their efforts in that regard and wanted the product team to become a lot more of a central sort of driving force to the business. So it was sort of with renewed spirits, and yeah, it was, I think, with good effect, and sort of it's sort of really taken off from that position. So really glad I went back.
Was this still
Peter Gabriel?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was still his, right. Okay.
Yeah. When I went back, it was still under Peter's leadership, and then it was about, if I remember correctly, about a year after I rejoined, that Audiotonics acquired the company. So there was a little bit of the old management, and then it was straight into the sort of Audiotonics era.
How did that affect the company?
I mean, it's affected it hugely, really.
Positively or negatively or both?
Really positively. I think always situations like that, there's always some skepticism, but it's, I think, proved to be a vital move, really, for SSL. And I mean, particularly with the products I'm involved with some of the smaller products as well, we've really been able to start building the products we always wanted to make, but could never get to for the right price. So I think it sort of really helped SSL fulfill what it was trying to do for years and years. And that is still in conjunction with the big desks as well. So there's sort of 4 verticals, we call them. There's studio, the sort of big studio consoles. There's the live market. There's the broadcast market as well, which features I/O and digital consoles. And I can't remember whether I got to this. There's sort of the smaller studio equipment we call audio creation products, and we've got plugins now. So yeah, it was really a great move. There's sort of no doubt about that, really.
Ricky Damien,
yes, that's the one.
It came back to me there in the middle of the chat. Yeah, he's Mark Ronson's engineer. We should point that out. Yes. Indeed. Now, yes. What's your pre-SSL education, interests, all that sort of?
Pre-SSL, I guess I studied at the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts back in, when was that, 2007 to 2010. When I was at school, I literally couldn't wait for the opportunity to do music tech. So even before that, at secondary school, I sort of was always interested in recording, being able to record myself, all of that stuff. I think my dad helped me put.
You never had the I'm going to be a rock star.
Oh, I mean, God, yeah. But I mean, I think I got that out of my system
right
really early on. So I think, early teens doing the usual thing, playing in a rock band.
Which you still do, as far as I recall.
Well, a little bit of wedding band stuff now, but that whole thing, that was definitely the fascination. But I think as I went through my teens, wanting to record myself, playing stuff, just getting music in and out of a computer. My dad sort of helped me build a little DI so I could get sort of signals in on my PC and all of that, really. So
was your dad an influence then?
Only in terms of facilitating the the method of recording when I literally knew nothing.
Like, is he a musician?
No, he's not at all. No, it's really bizarre. But he is really he's very practical, a lot more practical than I am. So. He used to sort of repair TVs in the days where TVs would be repaired instead of just sort of sent back.
Ah, right. Okay.
So a bit of electronics.
Belts and braces.
Yeah. So,
right.
He helped me do some very bad recordings initially. But yes. So I've always had a sort of passion for recording and stuff like that. So it really just progressed. Obviously, being able to study at university in LIPA was great. And then post that, I did the usual thing of interning around a few studios before I swiftly ran out of money and stayed on too many people's sofas. So I did sort of walked all that walk, I guess.
It wasn't a music course; it was a technical course.
Yeah, not the one that I did. So I did sound technology. But the great thing about LIPA is it is a performing arts university. So you are, around you have got musicians who are studying music. You've also got dancers and actors and light, theatre technicians. So it's a good space for all those people to collaborate, really.
And you'll always have a bunch of musicians readily
on
available.
Hand. Yeah, ready and willing. It was a brilliant place, and there've been loads of really great people come out of it. Mike Crossy being probably the most memorable name. John Gilmore, who's done a lot of the 1975 stuff. So
okay,
it's got a reputation for producing some real talent, and yeah.
Was SSL your first job then?
Not right. I mean, I worked in a call center, so
Yeah,
for
but I
about
mean,
all
like
of 2 months.
within the industry.
Yeah, well, yes. I think before I joined SSL, as I mentioned, I'd done various stints of 2 weeks interning here, a month of assisting here. Like I began the studio stuff. I had done a studio internship over between second and third year down at Modern World Studios over that summer, learning from people like Clint Murphy. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, SSL. I was lucky enough that it was my first, real job. Yeah. My first contact with SSL, so my third year research project at university was focused on analog compressors and, why certain types are used for, X job, why every time I walk in the studio, is there an 1176 on the lead vocal, blah, blah, blah. Funnily enough, part of that research, I had to do an element of primary research. At the time, the forum now known as Gearspace, I remember before a lecture, I posted quite innocently a few of my burning questions about why people use certain compressors. Anyway, I went off to the lecture. I came back from the lecture, and my inbox was just full of responses from the forum, which is just people, just go, how can you possibly ask that? What a stupid question, X, Y, Z. This forum has been, closed. So basically just got a lot of abuse in the space of an hour. But Jim, who's still at SSL, Vice President of International Sales, he sort of was the voice in the SSL voice in the forum, and he saw what was going on and very kindly sort of said, "Do you want to come along to SSL and ask a guy called Chris Jenkins, who is probably the closest person you get now to Mr. SSL, ask him some questions about the bus compressor." So, so I had, even before I joined properly, I had a foot in the door, I guess. So I was very grateful for that.
That initial meeting, I guess, was a sort of a trial run, but it was introducing you to.
Yes, totally. Yeah. There was no. There was no.
Did you know who Chris was?
Well, after Jim had asked if I want to go and speak to him, I thought I better find out who this person is. Yeah, I mean, Chris he's retired now, but he was an incredible driving force behind the company, the man behind the design of like the Duality, the AWS consoles, the C series consoles. So yeah, I think I was a bit rabbit in headlights. He'd sort of marked up some block diagrams and talked to me a bit about technically the bus compressor and how it worked and why it was different. A lot of which was over my head at the time, but I think I've still got the folder somewhere with all of it marked up. So yeah, that was so appreciated at the time. And I'm grateful for Chris and ended up working with him closely over the years before he retired. So definitely gained a lot of valuable knowledge from him.
And also the man who wired the compressor for on
the exactly
Bill Collins drum sound.
Yes on the intruder. So Chris was before he was with SSL, he was engineer at the Townhouse Studios in London. So yeah, as you say, he was the man who rewired the desk so that the listen mic signal could be recorded to tape, because up until that point it came through into the monitoring section but had no way of being recorded onto tape. So literally overnight he got underneath the desk and sorted it so that it could be recorded. So he has his own place in music history, I guess.
I'm beginning to sound like a bit of an SSL fanboy here, which isn't really the point of the podcast as such.
Right.
But like the reason SSL found you was because Jim was looking online, etc., and they invited you in, and they formed a bond. And the next thing you're working there. Is that how they work? Is that how?
It's sort of. I mean, I guess really when I initially went down to meet Jim and Chris, I was still I was in my final year then. It wasn't just like I finished university, I rang them up and said, there was a period of 7, 8, 9 months and I just applied as normal, and I guess hopefully was the best person for the job. But I think it definitely helped. But I mean, in terms of general stuff, it's interesting at SSL now because I think when I joined in 2011 initially, it was more of an older workforce, I'd say. But fast forward to now, and there's lots of young, enthusiastic young people. No longer the sort of the young whippersnapper, and there's been a sort of a great balancing of mixture of youth and experience, really, which, if I think about it, is probably quite different to how it used to be. So I think that's only a good thing.
In terms of products, what are the products you've been associated with, and which are the products your fingerprint is on?
Right. I guess, top of the list would be Fusion, a sort of 2U outboard color processor. So there's something like Fusion, Bus Plus, which is our sort of newest evolution of the bus compressor. The small audio interfaces we've been doing, so the 2 and 2 Plus, the SSL 12, and also the our controllers, so our UF8, UF1, UC1, DAW/plugin controllers. So all of those are, at least in some way, my fault or my responsibility, whichever way you want to look at it.
Some of those are like analog only, and the other ones are digital.
Yes, correct.
How do you cross the line? How do you go from side to side, or what's the...
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think actually that's one of the aspects that gives a real good job satisfaction with anything. When you're developing products, from coming up with the ideas to getting them signed off to be created, to working with the engineers to implement them, to getting them ready, testing them, figuring out how we're going to talk about them and who they're for. It's really rewarding to just not be focused on, one particular thing. Like, I'm not just doing sales of this. You're involved with the whole thing. Often projects overlap, so it can be a bit of a challenge going from your headspace of, okay, I've got to think about this sort of deep bit about the signal flow of this analog box. And then the next day you're thinking about how this other completely digital product integrates, and we found a bug with this, and how might we look to fix it. So there's lots of very different things going on all the time, but I get a good mental workout every day. That's what it feels like. And in the environment at SSL, where it's very technically driven, and you've got half the building is extremely clever, intelligent, enthusiastic engineers, hardware, software engineers. There's always different challenges, and there's always people keeping you on your toes. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? You don't want to do this way. It just keeps me on my toes, and it keeps it interesting. I absolutely love that about the job. I think it's just so rewarding in that aspect.
The Fusion was kind of the first mega, 2-unit box that came from SSL that did what was done before, but in a different way.
I think at the time there were maybe one or two not as well known products which had started to do something like Fusion, but we really wanted to do something that effectively the ethos of Fusion was, people still love a bit of analog color, or they like using a bunch of, 5, 6, 7, 8 different plugins on their master track in their DAW. And it was like, can we just do something that puts all of those little elements, or most of those little elements, into one box that's really simple to operate? It gives you some character, some flavor, and can just sit on your master bus. So I think it was around the time. I think it's quite often the case with products that, in this weird way, lots of companies have the same idea at the same time. It's just the way the universe works. So it's crazy, but ideas tend to come in like waves from many different companies. So it was just, our take on, let's do something really interesting. And it was driven by, frankly, part of it was driven by thinking about what my favorite engineers who I'd shadowed what they used on their mix bus and going, okay, they use a little bit of this, they use a bit of that product, they use this bit of, they're not using all of that EQ, they're just adding some top and bottom, or they've got something that's doing a bit of saturation. It was just about sticking all those ideas together and putting them in a box, and that was Fusion, really.
Yeah, because when it came out, I thought it was a masterstroke just because it had included everything. But the way it was delivered was, it was for somebody who hadn't grown up with analog, wanted some analog stuff. Yeah. And it was one box that did assorted things. So how much of that was driven by the marketing department, or was it you, or was it, how did you arrive at the idea of Fusion?
I think, it's an interesting one. I think I had an idea of, well, actually, the truth is the idea initially was a little bit different, because I think I came back in and we were sort of told by engineering they had like an amount of resource to put into an analog product, like just sort of, here we've got a spare bit of resource, how do we best fill this? And it actually started off as in more desk form, and there was a little section over the center section, there was a little bit which was like, and here's a bit where we've got a few knobs for like analog color. And then it basically just got distilled into going, this would be more interesting if we did something in a rack mount unit that lots of people could access. And then the other part of it was, and part of that process, by the way, was, I think we looked through 30 to 40 ideas on the shelf for new products that had previously existed. So there was a lot of sieving through older ideas actually as well, and then
which is absolutely valid in terms of.
I mean, there were loads. There were always loads of over the years. That many people have come up with some great ideas, and most of them never see the light of day. So we've got this. There's always room. There's always the potential for inspiration from what people have suggested in the past. But we looked through all of those and sort of thought, okay, well, we think this color box is still a good idea. And a former colleague of mine, a chap called Alex Gidman, who's now I think in doing software engineering and stuff like that. He had an idea as well, which was, I think he had an idea for an EQ which had a shuffle button, which is basically part of Fusion. The stereo image circuit is works. The space control is controls the amount of bass frequencies in the side signal, which is stereo shuffling. So between Alex's idea, a bit of some of the ideas that already existed, and me being like, there's definitely room for a color box. Sort of, it all came together really. So. It's very rarely like one person's sole idea. I was enthusiastic, and I think the interesting thing about it was walking back in. Not everyone was convinced. Not everyone sort of really. Yeah, I think it was. It didn't sail through the new. It didn't sail through the new product introduction process, because I just think I think there were some other great ideas on the table at the time. 6, which became a product, which is a great little high quality desktop mixer, and you think something like that is a known quantity. It's like, okay, we know what this is. It's a little analog desk. Something like this was I know it sounds a bit mad now, but it was a little bit different at the time. And I don't think it was, in some cases, there wasn't the enthusiasm there, but we got it through, and it's turned out to have done pretty well. So we hadn't quite finished Fusion, and Audiotonics came in and really gave us the ability to roll out products in a way that we hadn't had before. So I think maybe it was just because it was the first product of that new era where we went and thought, actually, we can do these things like really successfully. I think it's important to put the context of, before that, we did have quite a successful range of analog outboard gear, but it was positioned a little differently. It was a little bit more expensive, and therefore maybe had a bit of a narrower appeal. Whereas with this, we really managed to get it at a price point that that basically appealed to aspiring engineers and also the professionals. And I think that was really key as well.
How did the new owners facilitate? You mentioned that they allowed you to make new products. In what way? Are they geared up like that? Or are they contacts? Or?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So Audiotonics, who own SSL, also own a bunch of other British audio manufacturers such as Calrec and Allen Heath. And, Allen Heath have been mass producing sort of high quality products in China for years and years and years. So Fusion was the first product that we had made in China, which for some reason, for some keyboard warriors on the internet can be a point of contention. But I mean, they're normally writing, their comments from their laptop or from their phone, which is also made in China. So, for me, it's like, we still have, for these products, things like quality is still really important. We've got, we design the tests that it runs through. We work with the company that make it very closely. There's a dedicated a guy out there from Audiotonics who, is on the floor ensuring quality. And I've seen plenty of quality issues from things that are manufactured in the UK or Europe. It's no different, really.
So that was the first SSL product to be made in China. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, it was.
And
yeah.
Had that product been made in the UK or wherever?
Well, I think we did the first prototype in the UK, and then. Sorry, Paul, you're going to say something?
I was just going to say, what was the difference in price, do you think?
It's significant, really. I mean, and it's things. I think the thing most people don't realize, it is crazy things like the cost of the metal, which actually is, obviously nothing to do with the audio quality or whatever. Anyway, you'd be amazed at the difference. A metal front panel and chassis, getting that manufactured in the UK to making it in China, and there's no difference to the customer. It's still a piece of aluminium or brushed aluminium. And then you've got things like, believe it or not, because of the sort of economies of scale of companies like Allen Heath building stuff, in many cases, we were able to pay less and get a higher quality equivalent component with some of the components that go inside. It is actually completely mad, really, when you think of it, that in those instances, we were able to buy higher quality components for less money. That actually benefits the customer. I think there's a very easy perception to draw of building stuff in China, but actually it was great. And and it doesn't affect the designers, the electronics designers, the PCB designers. They do what they always do. We're designing it to work at a certain spec. They will use the components they want to, they need to hit our specs. There's really no difference in terms of like, we're making this SL product. We still design it. It's just built somewhere else.
Would it be twice the price if it was made in England?
I can't remember the exact price now, but significantly more affordable for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
but actually, and sorry, because this is really interesting as well. I mean, I think it didn't really change. Like the product we wanted to create, the product price point that we thought this is a good price point. I think when we released it, it was like $1,500. None of that was all of the plans stayed the same. It was just about, getting it made in a most efficient way and a way that the customer gets a great product and the company make a good profit on it, but not one that's, taking the mickey.
Including those sort of elements as well. It's kind of a crossover product on two ways.
Yeah.
How will that develop in the future? How do you see, do you think everything will be made in China or some of it will be made in China and assembled in the UK, or what sort of?
I think it really depends. It depends on the product. I mean, things like the small audio interfaces, which, they need to be at a price point that your casual hobbyist can enjoy. You're not going to get the 16-year-old playing guitar, haven't got a budget. So you've got to make those things for like £100, £200. Those things will be made in China. There's no question about it. Some of the stuff we talked about, Fusion, the controllers, they're still probably going to be made in China. But there is, with the large consoles and things like that, sometimes there's a hybrid element. Sometimes they're still built entirely in the UK. It really depends. I guess that comes more into play when you're talking about things with a higher price point that are much smaller numbers. So,
of course,
most of the products I focus my attention on personally at the minute are the smaller ones, which ultimately, we're looking to sell to thousands and thousands of people, but we're not going to sell thousands and thousands of dualities or AWS in a year. So, and they're much more sort of specialized high ticket items. So often is as simple as what's the right thing for this product and nothing else really.
For the future, does the opportunity of making a product cheaper expand the likelihood of a more complex unit, for example? Do you know what I mean? Like the fact that it must be under $5,000 or whatever, but $5,000 from China makes a hell of a thing.
Yeah.
Do you know? Yeah. Does that come into play at all? That sort of thinking. Sorry.
I think really it's all driven from what the product needs to be, where it needs to sit. I mean, for sure, the ability to build stuff in China is really valuable to the business, but it just totally depends. There are examples of products which are built entirely in the UK, and that's because it's the right thing to do for that product. So it's good to have the option, and it just depends. It really just depends.
And for the future in general, load the products coming.
Yeah, just load
or not.
It's never ending. No, definitely. I think I don't really see myself having time to put my feet up anytime soon. So yeah, I think it's going to be. It probably sounds a bit boring, but it's going to be just more of the same for sure. So ultimately, we can't ignore the amount of people making music in their bedroom and this democratization of home studio products. So for sure we'll keep going with that. But also there are definitely plans for more, new consoles and things in a further future point. So I think SSL is pretty established at what it does, and it will continue to do that. So big products, small products, just hopefully continuing to keep to the solid state logic name and the ethos of making products that sound good and help people sort of work efficiently and improve their workflow.
With regard to plugins, are the plugins sort of, well, they're obviously based on the analog equivalent. Is there any relationship directly between them? Like, does the EQ sound like the EQ or whatever?
It's worth saying we do, the plugin range is something which has really expanded quite a lot over the past year or two. And there are really a mixture of plugins in there which are analog modeled plugins, but then there are some sort of completely digital, EQs and DSs and all kinds. In regards to the sort of more well-known ones, I guess, like Channel Strip 2, which is sort of an emulation of the 9000 series EQ and Dynamics, or 4KB, which is a model of the 4000B channel strip. The thing that I think is the unique aspect to those is, we're fortunate enough to have access to the original schematics of the console. So it's no secret there are lots of really good emulations, many of which we license to third parties, and those companies have created a model from getting one of our channel strips and measuring it and all of that stuff. But the interesting thing we've got access to is the original schematics, some of the original components in conjunction with measuring and modeling. So yeah, I think that's just a really sort of unique thing that our emulations, models, whatever you want to call them, offer. So yeah.
So that's SSL's Andy Jackson's way to do it. Many thanks to Andy for taking the time to chat. Please visit www.geniusmove.ie to find out about audio courses to suit you. Thanks for listening.